Holy crap, dude, allergies freaking suck. For like the last month, it's been so bad. I've not been able to breathe hardly, and it's been keeping me up at night. Yeah, I've just been low energy. I've always had seasonal allergies, but and it hasn't been this bad since I moved. But for some reason, this year is just something special. Something's changed. So yeah, we're gonna come out of that by trying to do rank some light gun games, as I said in the Time Crisis video. Uh, these there are a crap ton of light gun games out there, so I'm just gonna do the ones that I'm familiar with, which isn't a whole lot, despite the fact that I like the genre. But still, even if I had played all those games, that would take way too long. And yeah, I know I'm forgetting some, but again, this is like the best we're gonna do. So to start off, we're gonna start with one of the first light gun games I played. Oh yeah, and before I do that, I won't be having any games that are part of other franchises that I tend to do lists of or have done lists of, such as the Aliens ones. But we're gonna start off with the target shooting style games like Point Blank would probably be the best example because that's probably the one everyone's familiar with. I haven't played a lot of these, but they are kind of what got me into playing light gun games, because this first one here, Egg Venture, it was pretty fun when I was a kid. However, it does not stand up at all today. Like, it was primitive even back then, but again, kid, didn't know better. It's nothing more than a bit of nostalgia for me, because the game is pretty weak, so I'm just going to stick it in D and be done with it. Like, there's only so many ways you can shoot eggs and be amusing, especially how many times civilians will get in your way. Well, I guess they're called good eggs, or bad eggs if I remember correctly, but they get in the way a lot, and it's a bit of a quarter muncher because of it. The next one, Police Trainer, was somewhat more refined, still a bit basic though. This is the one I actually remember playing the most of, simply because I saw it everywhere. It's not as cheap as Egg Venture, but it's pretty basic. You're mostly just shooting silhouettes or kind of odd variations of targets. There's not a huge variety to them, but again, it works. As far as I know, it was never ported off the arcades, but it's an okay game. Never played the sequel. Never even seen the sequel. Didn't even know it existed until I was doing this list. Now, Point Blank, again, this is probably the target based one that everyone's familiar with. Made by the same people who did Time Crisis, or at least the same company. I had played all three of these in the arcade. They all play about the same, so I really can't say which one's better than the other. I seem to remember liking the third one the best, though I cannot remember why, because again, they kind of blend together, but you know, it's fine, they're all good. They're not great, but I would say put them solidly in B. I guess for the target shooting games, it'd be A, but just comparing to the better light gun games, they don't hold up as well. Now, unfortunately, they did get a follow-up on the freaking DS of all things. If I remember correctly, this is a pretty early one. It was just an excuse, really, just to make shovelware for the DS. Kind of like Yoshi's, that Yoshi game I cannot touch and go. Like, you know, this is the kind of thing you see as a pack-in or something. It's pointless. You're just tapping them. It's tapping things on the screen. You know, I guess it's still accuracy-based because of that, because there's a huge difference between shooting something with a gun and just tapping the screen. Like, this is honestly worse than just moving the crosshair around the screen, like if you're trying to play a console light gun game without a gun accessory. Or like a Wiimote or a Move. But it's pretty bad. Pointless to play, and there's nothing good about it. I think even if it was a light gun game, it would still suck. Now that we got those out of the way, let's get into some of the actual light gun games. Now, the first one of these I remember playing was Area 51. I also remember my dad liking this one. We played this one a fair few times at the arcade. I don't remember where was the first time I played it because I've seen like much like Police Trainer, I saw the original Area 51 all over the place. I don't think the pizza place we used to go to had it, but I don't know, maybe it was like at the bowling alley or something. Anyway, it's a bit basic by things like by these days standards, but back then it was pretty cool. Interesting blend of well, it wasn't really a blend really. It was just straight up an FMV game, but given the fact that it was a LightGun game and a good one at that, I didn't think the least of it. It is a bit short though, and it's also fairly easy because this is one of the few games I've actually beaten in the arcade. Never mind the ports. But I don't know. If it was longer, I would put it higher, but I think a B rank is fair for it. It did get a sequel called Site 4 before the series rebooted into a first-person shooter, which didn't do particularly well. This game actually was like 2 games in 1. The main game was okay. Like, I definitely remember it being a lot worse than the original Area 51, but I only played it like twice. I remember my main complaint is like enemies are like kind of tanky, and it just didn't seem interesting. If I was rating it based on the arcade game, I'd probably put it a low C or D, but it does come with something else, a target shooting mode similar to Point Blank. And this is the other thing that kind of got me into those types of games, because I remember the target shooting mode being really good. Like, maybe not as good as Point Blank, but pretty close. So it's a bit hard to rank this, considering it has a bland mode and a good mode. But just to be safe, I'll put it after the original. Another FMV game, which I think came out pretty close to Area 51. I think I played this in the arcade once. Probably twice. This also had a console port, but I never played the console port. I thought it was okay. I remember a lot of people didn't like it, probably because it was very short. And I know the console port didn't add anything. So I'd say put it in C. It's okay. Now we move on to something a bit more known. Maybe, I don't know, maybe this is more well known than Time Crisis, but one of the big 2 LightGun series was House of the Dead. I actually have not played any of these in the arcade. Actually, no, I take that back. I might have played 2 once. But I could be wrong, but again, the rest of them I know for a fact I never played them in the arcade. I'm missing the... Oh, wait, there it is. But anyways, the original I think was my favorite. It was pretty good for its time. I did play this on the PC, by the way. So I never actually got to play it with a gun. But even the port playing with a mouse is pretty fun. It looked pretty good for an arcade game. The gore effects were well above their ahead of their time. At least for arcade games go. And the soundtrack was really good. And there was also different paths you could take, which is pretty unique and gave you reasons to play it multiple times, regardless of whether or not you're playing the port or in the arcade. So, the only major complaint about this one is the difficulty is pretty nasty, especially on the boss fights. So, I'm going to put this in A, but yeah, it is a hard game for better or worse. I do wish it had been ported to something other than just the PC, and I think the Saturn. Like, it would have been good to have that on the PlayStation with the GunCon. Not that what matters today, because the freaking GunCons do not work on anything that isn't a old standard display TV. And unfortunately, the GunCon 1 games do not work on anything on newer consoles. Well, I take that back. They do work on the PS2, but they don't work on the PS3, despite the fact that it's backwards compatible, because it will not read any USB guns. So the USB guns that are capable of being used on LCD screens will not work with it unless you're playing it on an emulator. But anyways, enough yapping about CRTs. Let's move on to House of the Dead 2. This one did get multiple ports outside of just the really niche ones. I got one of the Dreamcast. I don't know if it had one on the PlayStation. I also played this through the PC port. It did get a bit more content to it. It did get more content than 2 because it had like a sort of pseudo target shooting mission mode similar to the Crisis missions and the Time Crisis ports. I don't think it's really that much better or worse than the first game. I'd still put it in an A. The only thing I'd complain about is the voice acting is atrocious, even for the series and even for the time. But it's still a great game, good follow-up. I highly recommend playing both 1 and 2 if you haven't already. The first one actually did get a remake, and the second one supposedly is getting one, but no one's seen it. But I'll talk about those remakes in a bit. But if you're going to play the originals, probably the best bet is just playing it with a mouse on PC ports. Unless you have the original hardware and a CRT to play those other ports on. 3, House of the Dead 3, I don't remember what this was ported to, but once again, PC port, I played. This one was kind of a step back for me. I don't know, the level design wasn't as interesting, and it had some janky mechanics. I don't remember, it's not bad or anything, but it was definitely a step down. I'd probably put this on a low B. It's still worth playing. I remember the story being like really out there, but what do I know? That's really hard to talk about that one because this one I only played once, and not recently, I might add. Now 4 was interesting. This one did get ported to the PlayStation 3 of all things, but they did something really stupid and annoying with it. It will work with a Move controller, but it will not work with the GunCon 3. What were they thinking? Like, why would you not, like, make that compatible? I mean, I get the GunCon 3 failed miserably, but still, like, those of us who bought it for Time Crisis 4 and I guess Rising Storm really would have appreciated that. But alas, since I don't have a Move either, I've only played this with a controller. It probably would have been enjoyable in the arcade, although I noticed the fact that replaced the pistols with the machine guns. So I have no idea if the arcade you were still using pistols or they had a machine gun mode like Crisis Zone. For the port, I would say low B again. Arcade might have been better, but I can't really say, so I would say it's a little bit worse than 3, but probably about the same. Overdrive, or Overkill. This one was interesting. This one was exclusive to consoles. Originally it was a Wii to work with the Wiimote. But later it was adapted to work with the Move on the PS3. I really like this game. I would say, actually, you know what? I would say this is probably the best one in the series for a gameplay perspective. It steps up the gore. There's a lot more content than any of the other arcade games, but that's good because it is a console game. The only complaint I'd have is the story is like ridiculous even by House of the Dead standards. And your partner character will not shut the fuck up. And not only that, he's like a walking stereotype for... he's like the... He's ghetto trash the stereotype is all I'm going to say on that. I hated his ass. But it's definitely worthy of standing up with 1 and 2, if not a bit better. So A tier goes. If you've only played the arcade games and you get a chance to play Overkill, I highly recommend it. The Wii port works perfectly fine with a Wiimote. I don't know about the PS3 if you have a Move, but probably the safe one is the the Wii version, since most people have a Wii, and I know the controller works fine. Though the PS3 version does come with a bit of extra content, so up to you if you think that's worth it. House of the Dead Scarlet. I only played this once recently on an emulator. There is no port of it to speak of, and I've never once seen it in an arcade. Of course, this also came out at a time period when arcades were pretty much dead. This is definitely the worst one, but it's still not bad. I would say maybe a top of C, bottom of B. I'd say bottom of B. Like, it's okay. There's no reason to rush out and play it. The story has screw all to do with the rest of the series, so you're not really missing much. But if you get a chance to play it, it's worth a credit. But, you know, again, if you got Techno Parrot, it works just fine on an emulator. Now, the remake of the first game, I appreciate the effort, but it needed more time in the oven, and it needed to come out with better controller support. It runs at like 30 FPS. The remastered soundtrack kind of sucks. Visually, it just looks like a Unity swap the game. Gameplay-wise, it is intact. It's not offensive. It mostly plays the same. But my biggest issue is the fact that the controls suck. I don't know about the other versions, but I played this on the Switch because people were talking about how you can use a single Joy-Con as a pistol, and that's kind of sort of true. The problem is the fact that the single Joy-Con is gyro, not IR, like the Wiimote, so you're constantly have to recalibrate it. It's still better than using sticks, but it leaves a lot to be desired. So I'm going to put this one in C. You're not missing much by ignoring it, so unless you see it on a deep sale, just stick with the original. Now we go on to my favorite series, and probably one of the most well-known. It is Time Crisis. Yeah, I actually bought a gun just for this game. Or by that I mean the gun con, just for this game. On PS1. I was actually going to get mostly for Point Blank, but I saw it and ended up getting this version instead because it looked like fun. This one was actually kind of revolutionary. Not only because, just besides being a damn good LightGun game, but this, I believe, was one of the first one that had manual cover taking and reloading, instead of just shooting off the screen to reload and just getting fucked if you're about to get shot. In the arcade, you press the pedal to duck behind cover, in which case you'd be immune to attacks, and you'd also reload. So there was a lot of strategy to this. Granted, you couldn't just stay behind cover for forever because of the time limit, but a time limit for most of the part was fair. And I can't remember, very few of the games did I actually lose a life from running out of time in sections. So don't let that throw you off if you hate time limits. This is the one game I have not played in the arcade. And maybe I've seen it in an arcade once, but I've only played it the PlayStation version, which, by the way, the port is excellent. Everything from the arcade, from what I can tell, is intact. There weren't really any sacrifices made. And not only that, it comes with a whole ass second campaign. While the second story is shorter, it does have branching paths, which add a lot to replayability. And visually, it was pretty good for the time. The sound design was great. Voice acting was a bit stupid, but it's an arcade game. What do you expect? Music was pretty top-notch for its time, and the tracks that were in the main game were pretty iconic. And you ended up being scattered throughout the rest of the series, and the add-on had some pretty good tracks too. S tier you go, because it's the first three Time Crisis games are just the pinnacles of LightGun gaming to me. 2 also goes in S because it just does everything Time Crisis 1 does, but better. The port I was not that thrilled about. Because they changed the visuals from polygonal to regular 3D models, which it does look better technologically, but there's something that was lost in the style change. Unfortunately, while it does come with new content, instead of adding a second campaign, they added these things called the Crisis Missions, which anybody who's played Left 4 Dead 2, or not Left 4 Dead 2, House of the Dead 2, has an idea of what these are. They're short scenarios which you have to kill a certain number of enemies under certain conditions, like limited ammo, even more strict time, 1 life, maintaining a minimum accuracy, so forth. A lot of them were detached from the game, so there were like unique locations to them, but they were fun, but they're usually something you play through and you beat them and you never touch it again. So, unfortunately, of the ports of the 3 main game, that one was a bit lacking. But still, that doesn't change the fact that as far as the arcade games go, it was easily the best of the 3, and I would go as far as to say the best LightGun game arcade game ever made. It did everything the first one did, but better. Excellent soundtrack, great visuals for its time. Gameplay was refined, it was smoother. You know, I can't glaze it enough. It's damn near flawless. Just, the only thing I complain about the fact is it's probably the shortest of the main games. Now 3, on the other hand, they did some interesting things with 3. It still follows the same formula as 1 and 2, but they added a weapon selection system where you can, in addition to the basic handgun, you also got a shotgun, a machine gun, and a grenade. And obviously the grenade was screen clearing. Well, that wasn't quite screen clearing, but had a large AoE, so it may as well have been. It did a lot of damage to armored targets. And to get more ammo, for the special weapons, you either had to die or shoot the yellow guys that used to just give you bonus points in the first 2 games. It added a lot of depth to it, but yeah, the level design wasn't quite as good as 1 and 2. Had a great soundtrack though, again. Really the only drawback is the fact that it's a bit harsher in some ways. And again, the level design just isn't as good. Plus the bosses are kind of meh. They're not terrible or anything, but they're not great. As far as the arcade, I would say this is the weakest of the 3 original games, but the port, on the other hand, this took the Time Crisis 1 port and was on steroids. Everything that the arcade version had to offer was intact, with no changes to the visuals. And more importantly... Oh, why is the music glitching out? Hold on a minute. Let me see if I can fix that. Well, hopefully now that it changed tracks, it will fix, which is unfortunate because I like that track. And unfortunately it does not. So my apologies on the quality of the audio. Don't know why it's doing this. I'll try to talk, I'm just gonna... Oh, it seems to have cleared up, maybe? Huh, guess it did. Anyways, or was I? Yes, I was talking about the port. Not only did it have everything the arcade had intact, but it added a whole ton of new content. Not only are the Crisis missions there from 2, brand new by the way, not just the repeats, but it also had an additional 15-level campaign, which is longer than the base game. And it also had these new sniper missions that were kind of interesting, where you kind of, I don't want to say silent scope style, but you would zoom in, you would use the cover system to zoom out while on cover, and then to shoot, you'd release or press, depending on where your settings were, to zoom in and snipe targets through the scope. I know some people didn't like it. I thought it was pretty cool and pretty well done. And it added some variety to the campaign. Honestly, I actually kind of like, in some ways I kind of like the expansion pack campaign a bit more than the base one. But either way, it's also an S tier. Now if I was, all three of these games are excellent. If I was rating them based on their arcade ports, which I guess I kind of am, I'd have it to where I've got now, where 2 is the best, 1 is second, and 3 is close third. But if I was rating them on the ports, 3 had the best port by far, then 1, then 2. But anyways, enough glazing the original Time Crisis trilogy. Project Titan. This was a standalone console exclusive for the PS1, which unfortunately means playing it with a light gun is basically not an option unless you're on an emulator and have an LCD gun. It was good, but it had issues. The difficulty was kind of punishing, and I'm guessing it was just the fact that it make up for its short length, because it's about as long as the first game's base game with no additional content. But it was pretty brutal. You only got like 3 lives and 3 continues unless you're playing on easy. If you're playing on easy, you get locked out of the final chapter. And if you game over, you had to start the current level over. So, yeah, it was punishing. Though it was a tad bit easier to tell when you're about to get shot, since unlike the original game where there was no warning, there was a red bullet that would flash on the screen. And this is before 2 added the targeting cursors to show when you're about to get shot. That said, the level design was decent. Soundtrack was pretty alright. That's what I got playing. I really don't have too much complaints for it, apart from the brutal difficulty. I guess it wasn't. I'm being a bit harsh on the difficulty. It wasn't that brutal, but it was probably a bit harder than you'd want for an arcade game, or for a light gun game. But it's definitely doable. I've beaten it on normal multiple times. I'm gonna say this is probably the top of B, just because it's not as good as the original trilogy, and again, the difficulty can be a bit of a turn off on replays sometimes. Crisis Zone. This was a kind of an interesting one for me. I love playing against the arcade because, unlike other games where you had pistols, this game featured a machine gun, and it was Time Crisis. It was a Time Crisis game, but it did not have the Time Crisis name in the arcade. It was just called Crisis Zone. That was changed in the port, but we'll talk about that in a sec. But yeah, it was Time Crisis with a machine gun, literally. Everything about it was Time Crisis. But again, in the arcade, you played the gun with a machine gun mold. So not only was it just Time Crisis with a machine gun, it added a bit of immersion just to be able to hold that machine gun in your hands, which for kid me was pretty awesome, because I never in my life thought I'd be able to actually get to shoot one. But level design was pretty solid. The 2 things I'd probably complain about is the sound design was pretty weak, and it was also very short. It had 4 stages total, and it's not like the other games where they're broken up into different areas. It's literally just 4 levels, and that's it. And the last level is just the boss fight. So it's very short. You could probably finish the whole game in about 30-40 minutes. Probably about 30 if you're playing the arcade version. Which in the arcade isn't an issue because it is pretty challenging, and you're probably not going to want to be there for more than 30-40 minutes anyway. But the home console port, that's a bit harder to sell because it's, again, a 30-40 minute game. It does come with new content though. There is a new campaign, but unfortunately the add-on campaign is even shorter. 2 stages and 2 main stages, and then a 3rd stage, which is just a boss fight. Now, the new stages are decent. Probably not as good as the main game, but they're pretty decent. Like, I'm glad that they're there, but just the fact that it's only 3 more stages just does not help the serious lack of content. I believe they also added crisis missions, but it's been a while since I played it, and I don't remember the crisis missions being very good if they're there. It also unfortunately did the same thing 2 did, where it changed the polygonal look into 3D models. And I've already ranted about that, so we're not going to get into that again. For the arcade game, I would say this is an S. For the port, I would say it's a B. So I'm going to stick it in the A. Now, 4 was a step back. It brought back most of the mechanics from 3, but it also added a sector cover system. Or in certain sections of the game, you'd have to change screens. Change between 3 screens. Well, I'm not really describing this right. You take cover, shoot left or right on the screen to change your position, that's what I meant to say. So you'd have to defend from 3 different angles, which was kind of interesting. I actually kind of like those sections. But unfortunately there weren't enough of them to really say they matter, instead of being a core mechanic. And plus they added this annoying ass new enemy where they're basically just bugs. And to kill them, you had to use the right special weapon. You had to use the shotgun for the flyers, the machine gun from the ground crawlers. And it just was not fun to fight these things. And it made the story even more stupid than it already was. Decent soundtrack. For the arcade, I would probably say this is a low B. Maybe a solid B, but for the port... I know a lot of people didn't like this, but I absolutely loved it at the time. They added, since the GunCon 3 had an additional control stick on it, they added a first-person shooter mode where you would actually get to walk around instead of being on rails, and then use the light gun to aim. Granted, it has not aged well, and I don't think it's nearly as needed now as I did back then. But at the time, it was pretty cool to have a hybrid game like that. Unfortunately, the level design wasn't that good in that mode, and they were very undetailed. A lot of them were just empty corridors, which is unfortunate because it could have been a lot better. But again, I enjoyed it a lot at the time. I know I'm hyping that FPS mode a bit up because of nostalgia, but it was pretty cool, and it was longer than the base game too. Though it did incorporate the arcade levels in it, so it was like, since it was a side story, you'd swap between playing the arcade levels and playing the FPS levels. I'm going to say it's a high B, just because I do like the extra content that was added, and I believe this also had the crisis missions. And unfortunately the version of it that came in Rising Storm only contains the arcade game, which if you don't have a GunCon 4 and only have a move, which means you're going to miss out on all the extra content. But speaking of Rising Storm, this is essentially Crisis Zone 2. Just not very as good. I don't know how to I have mixed feelings about this one. There's a regular... it's pretty similar to 4, in which case there's like regular on-rail light gun stages from the arcade, and then there's a second campaign which has FPS style moving, much like 4. Now I will say the level design for the FPS stage is better than that in 4, but that doesn't change the fact that the mechanics are not that good. And while it does support the GunCon 3, the GunCon 3's controls are wonky. So I'm just going to say this is like a high C, because again, the arcade mode isn't that good, and the extra levels just aren't that good either. The story's stupid, and the boss fights are irritating. But it's a hell of a lot better than 5. This game ruined the series. The story is ridiculous, the gameplay mechanics suck, because it's basically just a crappier version of the cover swapping mechanic in 4. The level design's bad. There's just nothing good about it. Like, I guess the soundtrack is pretty decent, but that's the only good thing I can say about it. Like, in the D tier you go. I've never seen it in the arcade, and there's probably a reason for it, and it was never ported off the arcade, and there's probably a reason for it too. So, if you're like me and just wanted to play it because it's the one game you've never got to play, don't worry about it. You're not missing much, and if you still want to play it, just play it on Technoparrot. It works fine with the emulator. I think there's even also a standalone version you can play as well. Anyways, next, let's get off Time Crisis. Ghost Squad. This is pretty good in the arcade. This is basically similar to Crisis Zone, although it doesn't have that cover mechanic, if I remember correctly. But, yeah, it was another machine gun game, and in the arcade, the mold was a lot cooler than Time Crisis because it was modeled to look like an actual gun, real life gun. Whereas the one in Crisis Zone was kind of generic. Level design is pretty good. It was a bit more grounded than the Time Crisis game, so, you know, if you don't like the overtopness for it, you probably like this one, because both the themes and the story are a lot more down to earth. This is pretty much like Call of Duty the LightGun game in some ways. My biggest complaint about the fact that it's very short. There's 3 stages total and that's it. So it's even shorter than Crisis Zone. Thankfully these stages are good, are rock solid, and again the mechanics are fine. It was ported to the Wii, but unfortunately the port was bare bones. There's no new content, so once you're done, played the game for 30 minutes and beat the 3 stages, that's it. Basically that's all. Just go. The only reason to replay it is just to enjoy the game again for another 30 minutes, or just go for high scores. I'm going to say, if I was going off the port, I'd say low B, but for the arcade, I'm going to say it's an A, so I'll put it below Crisis Zone. Next we go to a bit of a hybrid game, Police 911. This game was really cool. At least I thought it was cool. This had a twist to it. In the arcade, it had a floor mat that you stood on, and the floor mat could register your movements. So instead of pressing on a pedal to take cover, you had to manually move your body, and your body would follow on screen would follow what you were doing. So if you wanted to crouch, you had to crouch. If you wanted to lean in the cover, you had to lean. So not only get a bit of exercise there, but it was quite immersive. Unfortunately, the gameplay wasn't that good. Like, if I remember correctly, the bullets traveled at extremely slow speeds, so it was like they were shooting you with like... it was like they were shooting you with like magic fireballs that were slowly traveling. It was really off-putting. This was a bit hard to rate, honestly. You know, because it was such a unique game and it was fun to play, I want to put it higher, but like, looking back on it, there's like a lot of flaws to it that also held it back. So I'm going to put it in B above 4. There was a sequel, but I never played it, or at least I don't remember playing it. So I have no idea how it is. Now, the Virtua Cop games are hit and miss to me. They're better than some of the other old LightGun games, but the first one I just remember kind of being just okay. It was nothing really special, apart from the fact that it was a bit ahead of its time visually. Now, the second game was a huge improvement. The level design was so much better. It doesn't stand up to time as well as the other games do, but for the time period, it was one of the best. Both 1 and 2 were ported to the PC. I don't know if there were other systems. I've played both in the arcade and on the ports. I'm gonna say 2 is like a low A, just because it's that much of an improvement, and it was kind of the standard of LightGun games to look at until House of the Dead really took off and Time Crisis became a thing. There was a third game. Again, I only played it once, and I just remember it being okay. So I'm just gonna put it in C, because like I remember so little about it. I only played like maybe a credit's worth, and I just like, oh, this is Virtua Cop 2, but worse. I'd say it's worse than the first one as well. It's just okay. Next is probably one of the oldest series out there. or at least that I know of, not counting like the old Nintendo LightGun games, which I'm going to cover at another time, like Duck Hunt. They were kind of like pseudo FMV, but they were so jank. They were so visually jerky. Like it looked like the animations looked like they were moving at like 5 frames a second, which would be okay if the shooting was good, but it's not. It's very static, and you're just waiting for someone to pop up. And they usually came at you only like 1 or like 2 or 3 at a time. It was just really boring to play. So I'm gonna put this one at low C because it was palatable for its time, but it's aged very poorly. But I'll give it credit for being acceptable for the time. The sequel, on the other hand, was worse, and that's going in D. And for some reason they changed it to a Western theme, but I just remember it being really bad. But I only played it once. Deadstorm Pirates, I've never seen in the arcade. I only played it because of Rising Storm. It's an extra game it's included. It's very basic. It's kind of disappointing, you know, playing a game like Time Crisis and going to a more basic game like that. It's not a bad game, but it's not really a particularly good one. It's not really memorable. Like, I guess the theme's unique, because I've never seen a pirate-themed LightGun game until now. But, I don't know. It's just nothing special about it. It's just kind of there. You know, if you want another LightGun game, you got a GunCon 3 and a PS3, go for it, maybe, but just don't expect much. Carnival, didn't like it. It's not terrible, but it's not good. I had a lot of similar complaints I had that with Lethal Enforcers. It's just very visually jerky, and there's not a whole lot going on the screen, and there's... Being the fact that it's another FMV game, there's a lot of cheap deaths, but I've only played it like once or twice. Maybe it gets better that later, but from what I played, it's just not good. Next we go into something a bit more unique, Silent Scope. These were a bunch of sniper games. I've played the first 2 a couple of times. I never got far, but I remember having a lot of fun with them. I don't know how the console ports are, because number one, I don't know if they actually come with a sniper type weapon to make the gameplay feel like as it should, or if it just uses a regular pistol. But for the arcade, the fact that they were able to make a game like this that just you required a whole different skill set apart from just basic shooting was amazing. Like, actually having to look through the scope to get your targets locked on and carefully fire, because, again, your rate of fire is low, was excellent. Like, 1 and 2 are both going in the A tier, just for that alone, because again, as an arcade experience, they were excellent. It's just too bad they didn't transition very well into a console port. But it is what it is. I don't remember if I played 3 or the Bone, whatever it is, the last one was called. I know for a fact I didn't play that one, but I don't think I played 3 either, so maybe they're good. I'll probably never get to try them because, again, I'm not willing to play it without the actual sniper scope. But yeah, if you ever get a chance to try those games in the arcade, take it, because, again, it's a unique experience that you will not find anywhere else, and you will not find on the home console if you play the ports. Target Terror. This game was bad. It wasn't terrible bad, but it was basically like Maximum Force, but with the fun factor of Lethal Enforcers. I never played it in the arcade, but there is a Wii port of it. Unless you're just desperate to play like a LightGun IR based game for your Wii, just ignore it. There's barely any content, and what content there is just not good. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put it in the F tier because it's just not good. And then we have, last but not least, we have Gunfighter Legend of Jesse James. This is another console-only game. This was not made by the people who made Time Crisis, but you might think so because it plays very similarly. There's a time limit, and the cover mechanic is there. Unfortunately, the level design does not hold up at all to Time Crisis. It's not bad, mind you, but it's not worth going out and like buying a CRT and the GunCon 1 play. There's a couple of extra mini games that come with it to make up for the fact that it's a short arcade game, but honestly, the Crisis missions were better. But if you do have a PS1 or 2 and a CRT to play them on, like other LightGun games, and you got a GunCon 1, it might be worth your time to pick it up just to be able to get some use out of it and play Time Crisis the Western. But for all intents and purposes, I would say it's just an okay game. But yeah, these for the most part are the LightGun games I've played, apart from games that are going into other franchise, like the Aliens or Terminator ones. I know there's a couple of console exclusives as well that are not part of other franchises that I'm just not going to be able to cover because, again, I do not have the equipment to play them properly. And I don't want to judge them too harshly because I probably judged Yoshi Safari a bit harsher than I probably should have because I was playing that with a controller hack. And I honestly kind of want to try the Super Scope at some point just to see how it is. But yeah, these are some of the arcade games I grew up playing, and most of these I do recommend giving a try if you see them in the arcade. But ports, hard or miss, take them or leave them as you go.